Didn't have to be this way, boys. You could have stopped it. You could have prevented it. It didn't. It's happening anyway. But this is talking about the fact that the United Kingdom and much of the West has been undergoing a large bout of immigration. And I did a video a while back talking about something about this, the fact that we were never asked. And it's evidenced by the party manifestos. We went back to 1997 when something happened. The rest of it happened. And at no point did either of the parties talk about increasing immigration. In fact, they continuously spoke of having stricter controls or lowering the numbers. And instead, they both just ramped it up to a billion migrants.
Are you going to present us with 70 years of lies and betrayal on immigration?
Yeah.
Right.
I thought that'd be fun.
Yes, that would be, actually.
So this is just the House of Commons website, and this is just a graph here, and we'll keep some of this in mind as we go, right? So you can see here, this is the level of immigration, that being that graph there. You got the net, and then the emigration there as well. So immigration back in 1964 was about 200,000 people. The net was about 50,000 people a year leaving, but you're getting 200,000 in. And then from here, right up until like 70-something, it goes down, and it goes down some more, and then the 80s, it starts to rise up a bit, and then, 1997 happened, and the rest is history. So I thought we'd just go back real quick, because opposing immigration is now the most centrist position you could possibly hold. And this is an amazing piece of data here. So it's by constituency, in which they ask people, do you want the numbers reduced and tighter controls, or do you want the numbers increased and relax the controls? And the only places that wanted it reduced are like the mental city people.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I mean, properly insane types, because I'm tempted, and you were tempted, and we were all tempted to just have a check at the ONS ethnicity graph to see. And yeah, that does correlate quite nicely on this.
But at the same time, even parts of the country that are almost majority immigrant still
want tighter controls.
Yeah, want tighter controls, which really surprised me. I was expecting the entirety of Birmingham to be red and the entirety of Manchester to be red. Obviously, London is where it's a big hotspot. But even up around Manchester and Liverpool, it just seems to be hotspots in the centre of the city.
I think that's because the most racist anti-immigrant people you ever meet are first-generation immigrants who came here legally.
But then you've got these
drivers,
these areas like Cambridge or Brighton, which don't have large immigrant populations.
Oh yeah, but it's full of cum-guzzling wankers there.
The Tory voters in waiting.
Not just their breath that smells of cum; it's also their farts.
Anyway. I'm not talking about gay people. I'm just talking about
progressives.
Yes, them sort.
Yeah. For YouTube, I'm not talking about homosexuals, just talking about weirdos.
Yes,
which
Lib Dem voters, all that sort of thing. Tory boys.
Sorry to interrupt the video, but I thought I'd announce that we have a new line of merch. This is our aesthetics collection. So I was thinking that in the face of AI art debasing the very concept of art, actually we'd do something quite positive. So we commissioned a series of paintings that were actually really beautiful and could be something that we could present outside of politics. So, for example, we have this magnificent painting of a ship weathering a storm, which I thought was just really nice. And we have, of course, a glorious, sort of surrealist, giant white tiger drinking from a lake. But also there are other things that are just kind of interesting, such as the chap lost in cyberspace, or something that I thought might, in time for Christmas, make a great present for your mum or something like that. A beautiful cat lounging on some clouds. Basically, we wanted to do some stuff that wasn't just political, so things that were just nice and beautiful and interesting, because that's also a part of the world we want to curate. So you can go over to shop.lotuses.com. Buying the merch is a really great way of supporting us and means that we can live past demonetization. And I'm sure they make great gifts for the folks as well.
Anyway, but this chap here, who caught my eye because he's done something rather funny, which is that he's campaigning for reform, which is a good boy, and he's made some graphics here, which he's passing off as like, hey, Reform made these, and Reform obviously officially didn't, but I'm not exactly going to denounce them, so he's been spreading them everywhere.
And
so
this is the best campaign posters that Reform could ever hope for.
Yeah, the design's great. So 1 in 6 people in England and Wales are first-generation immigrants. 1 in 3 people in Reading are born outside of the UK. 40% of all immigrants arrived in the last 10 years. The striking stuff we're already
all sourced from the ONS as well.
Those are really good ads.
And he's been responding to loads of stuff. So like this guy posting about house affordability. And it's now as bad as it was in 1876, the ability to buy a house versus the average income. And he's like, I wonder why this happened. And obviously our good boy over here is just like, Maybe it's to do with all those immigrants.
Don't make me tap the sign.
Yeah, 48% of all social housing in London is occupied by people born outside of the UK. Around 20% of all social housing in the UK is occupied by foreigners. There was more immigration in the UK in 2023 alone than between 1066 and 1950.
Yep.
Which, okay.
It goes to show you solve that problem, and then you just get to solve like 20 of the other top 25 problems automatically.
There is a reason I bang on about it a lot.
Yeah.
And it's exactly, you're correct. I mean, it's because you solve everything else. I mean, you can see here, it bumbles up and down, and then in 1997, something happens. And it goes off a fucking cliff.
I would be even willing to suggest that the NHS might work as it's supposed to if it didn't have tens of
There'd be a net
millions of
decrease
extra
because,
people.
yes, there are foreign-born doctors and nurses working there, but there's more foreign-born doctors, foreign-born patients. So the net result would just be an improvement in the NHS, yeah.
And you can literally micro-target that by ethnic group. But that's not what we're doing today. I thought we'd go
Yes.
back and check out the past. It's a history segment.
Ooh,
Yes.
Ooh, I'm taking...
it's a completely... We've had black pills, science segment, history segment.
So
join in,
1940 and 1945 are going to be interesting because that was the other big immigration push.
Well, no, that's the war. So all the houses got blown up, so you couldn't really... Yeah, the affordability for house kind of went through the roof.
Oh, I thought we were still looking at the immigration one.
Well, we're not quite there
Oh.
yet, because immigration, as you see from the previous graph, I'll get it back up, is not really a thing until around about the 90s,
Oh,
where
yeah.
you get the net.
Yeah, but there was some in the late 40s and 50s, but it's not captured on that.
There is an amount, because that data doesn't go back that far.
Yeah.
But the main thing here being Zavor, and then over here being the other kind of catastrophe.
Yeah.
And so
Invasion.
let's start off, because I said I went back to 1997 before. So we'll go all the way back as far as I could find, which is 1945. I'm literally going to show you manifestos. Riveting, I know. Anyway, but this is something I did this morning and realized this is actually quite useful for actually our understanding of the world. Because if you go back to the 1945 Labour Party manifesto, it's weird. It's really weird. I mean, some of it reads like today, where they would write, for example, the empire and the Commonwealth is the greatest force for peace and stability in the world. In the same way that people write today, they're like, oh, globalism is the greatest force for peace in the world. It's like, oh, shut up.
Rules-based international order, that kind of thing.
But I'm going to pick out a load of stuff. Let's go. So in the 1945 manifesto, there is zero mention of ethnic minorities because there aren't any.
But
there was
built-
the Irish.
But they built the country and then rebuilt it again after the war.
It turns out England wouldn't be anything if it wasn't for the English. Shock that one. It works for every other country on Earth. I don't know why it doesn't apparently work.
But the funny thing is, the claims that we were always a diverse country can just be refuted by going back to
Well, that's what I'm doing.
this.
So they also have literally zero mention of immigration policy. There's nada in here about that because it wasn't an issue. It's not a big thing. But there is some funny quotes out of this early one. Quote, "We must consolidate in peace the great wartime association of the British Commonwealth with the United States of America and the USSR. Let us not be forgotten in the years leading up to the war, the Tories were so scared of Russia that they missed a chance to establish a partnership which might have prevented the war." Which is a really weird thing to write.
Yeah.
Like, why didn't we side up with the USSR in the 20s or 30s?
Why didn't we side up with the genocidal maniacs to get rid of the other genocidal?
Yeah, I mean, you can see the moment here because I've always been told about
I mean, there is half an argument there that, you guys can go do what you're doing over there, but we don't really need to.
But you can see where this comes from. This doesn't come from any kind of pragmatism about stopping the war.
Yes.
This is, I
Yes.
love Stalin.
Yes.
The claims about him, I think, are exaggerated because it's 1945. They haven't had the Stalinization yet. And when this all came out in the 50s and whatnot to Britain, they hushed up about
I mean,
loving
come on,
the
if
USSR.
the cabinets and the shadow cabinets were in direct contact with the USSR during the war efforts, they knew what was going on in Russia.
They just denied it. So they also say the Labour Party will seek to promote mutual understandings and cordial cooperation between the dominions of the British Commonwealth, the advancement of India to responsible self-government, I love that, and the planned progress of our colonial dependencies. So it's still imperial language. India is going this way. I mean, at this point, the British Empire is bankrupt. So yeah, okay, we can't stop that one. So that's that. And then in 1950, because they won that election. So this is them writing for the next election. Again, zero mention of ethnic minorities, zero mention of immigration. During the last 5 years under Labour leadership, Britain has regained her moral position in the West, which is a polite way of saying we became irrelevant. we really did sort of disappear up our own arse.
Well, let's be fair. Suez, I believe, had not yet happened at that point,
We would
but
not.
it was on the horizon.
You can see the books written about the superpowers in 1945,
Oh, yeah.
and it's the British Empire, the Americans, the Soviets, and then by the 50s, it's like, no, it's the Americans, the Soviets. It's,
England goes, listen, guys, we kind of spent all of the money.
Yeah.
All of the money. And America, they gave us a lot of money, but they want it back.
So they then go off in this one and talk about how proud they are about losing India, Pakistan, Burma, and Ceylon, which they then say the Tories would never have done.
Wait, but
It's just a weird brag.
I was told that the only reason the empire was rich was because of our colonies. Why would we get rid of them if they were such an easy source of money when we were looking for money?
A lie. All right, year later, there's another manifesto because there's another election. Again, zero mention of ethnic minorities, zero mention of immigration, still not a thing. In fact, what the writing is in here is them still gloating about destroying the empire.
Thank you. This was a winning strategy last time.
They lost.
It's been 6 years, and we're still really pleased with the fact that we've done away with the thing that made us great.
Yeah, I mean, the wording they use is the Tories still think in terms of Victorian imperialism and colonial exploitation.
God, if only they had.
And then they write, he would have denied freedom to India, Pakistan, Ceylon, and Burma. So that they're proud of that. All right, there we are. I mean, whatever your views are on that issue, it's just really weird, isn't it? That the British Empire has a major party that's just like, man, I'm so glad we destroyed the empire. It became irrelevant.
I mean, at this point, I would like independence from India. I mean, that would be nice.
Yeah, I'd vote for it. All right, 4 years later, another election.
Yeah.
All right, what do they write in this one? There's still no mention of immigration. It's just not an issue. It is our responsibility to protect the weaker peoples from being exploited and to develop communities free from racial and color discrimination.
Oh, so it's got in.
This is the first mention I could find of racism bad. So there we are.
Okay.
It's not in the Conservative Manifesto, of course. They then go on to write, we helped India, Pakistan, Ceylon, and Burma achieve their freedom. They're not going to shut up about that for quite a while. All right, 4 years later, there's another one.
But I mean, who are they speaking to? Because it's not because now there would be a big constituency for that. So they were just writing to white working class people saying these are all the good deeds that we've done for India.
Yeah, I mean, when they were writing, he would not have allowed them their freedom. They're talking about Churchill, and they lost that election to Churchill. That's when Churchill got back in. They lose this one too. The transformation of the old British Empire into the first interracial commonwealth of free nations was the supreme achievement of the Labour government. They then go on to mention they freed India. Done already.
They really love that point, don't they?
I don't know why. I'm serious as well. They mention it in every fucking manifesto.
It's like that guy. It's like that guy that you meet at the pub who did one interesting thing 30 years ago and won't shut up about it.
If it wasn't for us, India wouldn't exist. It's like, oh, so I know who to blame.
Yeah.
Why? I can't find it. It's in there somewhere. And they then go on to mention that racial discrimination must be abolished. Now, there's an interesting point here, because at the time before this, going back, I checked out both parties. I'm just going to Labour because they're the most interesting for this time period, is that the conversation, even amongst the Labour Party, is that there's that interracial aspect of the Commonwealth is something to be respected in the same way a modern 4chan racist respects interracial unity, which is that there's the Arab world, then there's the white world, then there's the brown world or whatever, right? It's like that. That's how they're thinking of the Commonwealth in this time. Even the Labour Party is not writing one big multicultural fanfare. They're writing, no, the Arabs live in Arabia and we want to be friends with them and allies and we support them, but that's about it. And it's the same with the Africans and the same with the Indians. That's the framing, which I really think is worth noting. All right, moving on. 64, Conservative Manifesto. They lose this one, in case you're wondering. A Conservative government will continue to control immigration from overseas according to the numbers which our crowded country and its industrial regions can absorb.
Right, this
is the first ever mention of an immigration problem.
But yeah, this is after the Conservatives had allowed more immigration up to that point than we'd had in a long while when they did start to invite people over, mainly to fill up transport for London.
But the comparison is weird and probably wrong for us to do, because the levels of immigration from this time period are about like 1% of the population, whereas now it's about 13% in a single election cycle get replaced. I mean, the difference is unbelievable.
Well, still,
but you're right, because
going from nothing or
Sure.
or 0.01 to 1% is still a huge increase
Obviously.
that people were beginning to know. And it was only
Which is why they mention it. They say we want strict controls because our crowded island.
after we
I mean, in 1964, it's crowded.
after we've opened up a bit of the borders and realized it was a terrible idea, we will now close them. Do not worry. We are the Conservatives. We always keep our promises.
So then we get to the first mention of immigration in the Labour Manifesto ever, which is here in 1964 as well.
Is that the same? Yeah, same year they both mention it.
Yeah, and the Conservatives lose and Labour win this one. This is when they get back into power. Labour accepts that the number of immigrants entering the United Kingdom must be limited until a satisfactory agreement covering this can be negotiated with the Commonwealth. A Labour government will retain the immigration controls. The immigration controls being obviously very strict compared to modern day ones. They also say the Labour government, headed by Clement Attlee, granted full and complete independence to India. They're still not shutting up.
By the way, 20 years ago.
Shut up, India again. Did you
Clement
know we
Attlee.
freed India?
Clement Attlee at the bar, 4 pints down.
I freed India, don't you know? I dismantled the empire.
And I also like the wording about we're going to find a sensible settlement on immigration, which turned out being us going to the rest of the world and saying,
Gimme.
"Can we have all of you, please?"
Gimme.
And the other country saying, "No, you can just have our scum and criminals."
Yeah.
And then we go, "Yeah, all right, then we have."
Are they
have a
willing
million
to
of them a
serve
year?
me at Pret?
Yes.
So we go to the next election, 66. All right, so we've had one mention of immigration finally in British political history post-war, which is the less of it. All right, so in 66, in the field of immigration, right, the Labour Party, we shall continue realistic controls, flexibly administered, combined with an imaginative and determined program to ensure racial equality. There's a lot of fluff there. Incitement to racial hatred has now been outlawed. Apparently, up until then, you can do what you want. Any financial support given to positive work for promoting racial harmony, they're now saying they will support. A special committee in studying the law relating to positions of aliens and the Commonwealth immigrants who are refused entry or threatened with deportation shall be looked at. Finally, in this year, they shut up about India. They didn't write that this time. So there we
They
are.
didn't
they
get
wanted
drunk
to.
enough this time.
Yeah, but the official line again is strict, realistic controls on immigration and
Right.
dealing with aliens. The Conservatives write about how they need strict controls. They lose this election, so who cares?
We're up to 1966, and so far we've only had either no mention or we're going to limit it.
Yeah, and the numbers aren't really.
And 60 years ago, even 60 years ago, the government was saying, don't worry, we know you don't want this much immigration. We will reduce it or make it more manageable. And they don't. They just don't.
I do have to break character for a minute, though, and talk about that commie simping from earlier, because it comes back. They write, for no reason, Labour still believes that China should be a member of the United Nations. This is the CCP, because the Chinese Civil War was still going on. So
That was the middle of the Cultural Revolution.
yeah, but it's still, the war is officially still a thing. I mean, they're still bombing the Shinman Islands. But all of China, as we know it today, was basically owned by the CCP. And for some reason, the Labour Party are just like, man, we should get them in the United Nations. We're on their side. Fuck
China
Taiwan.
was utterly mental during this period.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about them genociding their own people, and the Labour Party's like, oh,
So Labour did
Wish that was
still
me.
manage to sink a few pints before they wrote this.
yeah, but forgot about India. China is my new best friend. All right, 1970, Conservatives win. They write, future immigration will be allowed only in strictly defined special cases. Whew, I could only get so erect. There will be no further large-scale permanent immigration.
Well, that was a lie.
Yeah, quote, our policies will reduce the causes of racial tension, the cause being immigration, and we will ensure that there will be no further large-scale permanent immigration.
Now,
Well, that's reassuring.
the cause of racial tension is English people not being happy at immigration. Therefore, and it was under Thatcher that they
Look at that difference.
Oh, I know, but it was under Thatcher that they started to do all of the what was it? Public order. What's the word for it?
Public order offence.
Yeah, the public order offence laws and such like that. So the Tories have consistently gone, don't worry, we hear you. Now shut up about it.
But it's a nice weird travel into the past, because as you can see there, in 1970, the Conservatives talked about racial tension as being caused by the large-scale immigration, whereas today, the cause of racial tension is
The native population.
Yeah.
It's been flipped entirely. Now we're the problem.
I think that's what they always meant. They just didn't say it as explicitly as they do now.
I don't know, man. I really do believe that the past is a foreign world. I mean, we had back then the Labour Party talking like a 4chan racist, which is at least respectable. So
Well, you would get jailed today for saying anything that these elections say.
So the Labour Party did also do a manifesto. They only mentioned immigration once in theirs, or anything to do with race or anything. They just wrote that immigrant ghettos have to be dealt with. Okay.
Well, let's make in the future. Let's make all of London, Manchester, and Birmingham a racial ghetto.
So 1974, Labour victory. What did they write? They will review the law of nationality so that immigration policies are based on citizenship, and in particular, they will eliminate discrimination on the grounds of colour, which didn't exist, in case you're wondering. This is a theme with British politics, which is we're going to get rid of racism. Where is it? Shh, we don't know.
I like this though, because they say that the immigration policies are based on citizenship, which presumably meant, don't worry, we'll just give them all citizenship, so it's not racist anymore.
Yeah. We get to Thatcher. Weird layout, but she wins, of course. I'm going to combine 79 and 83 because it's the same thing. She literally copy and pasted her own words.
Yeah.
So Thatcher wrote, or at least her people did, a firm immigration control for the future is essential if we are going to achieve good community relations. Again, the community relation problem comes from importing foreigners en masse. It will end persistent fears about levels of immigration and will remove from those settled, and in many cases born here, the label of immigrant. So how do you stop immigrants becoming this vast other in the country? Well, you lower the numbers coming in so that it actually becomes part of the woodwork, which is a plan. At least that's a plan.
It is important to point out that by this point in 79, it was under Labour in 76 that they implemented the Race Relations Act, which was essentially a hate speech 1.0 laws, and the Conservatives did nothing about that.
Well, they write here, I have the Labour manifesto in which they write, they'll introduce a positive action program for ethnic minorities. So, okay, I mean, that was the start of discrimination against whites, pretty much. There we have it. All right, moving forward. 87, Conservatives, there they are. They won. Immigration for settlement is now at the lowest level since control of the Commonwealth immigration began in 1962. They write, we want to see members of ethnic minorities assuming positions of leadership alongside their fellow citizens and accepting their full share of the responsibility. So this is a shift. This is another one.
This sounds like proto-DEI to me.
Yeah, because of course the wording before was, I mean, if they're here and they're good enough and they get there, I don't care, whatever. Instead, it's now
But now let's make them the boss.
Yeah, we want representation, which means fundamentally, even if they're not qualified, they're going to get there. So, yeah, okay, this is another shift in the world. They also go on to say they're particularly concerned about racial attacks. They require effective and sympathetic attention from the police. Okay? Before this, if you attacked someone for being a race you didn't like, it was just an attack. Now it's something special. Okay.
By the mid 1980s, am I wrong in thinking that a lot of the Rochdale style controversies would have already been beginning in smaller scale that would later end up getting revealed?
Yes.
So the Conservatives say, don't worry, we're going to be much more astute with the policing and such, and at the same time, the places around the country would still have been covering a lot of.
But this period seems to be completely schizophrenic, like they don't really know what the hell they're doing. Because they go on to write that immigrant communities have played an active part and influential role in British life without losing their cultural traditions. But then they also say that they want ethnic minorities to participate in British culture, and if they don't, they will suffer the permanent disadvantage if they remain in linguistic and cultural ghettos. So you want them to be different and foreign, but you also want them to be British and not foreign. So
also, the only permanent disadvantage is that we'll just kind of leave them to it.
Yeah. The Labour manifesto for this year literally just writes about Britain as if it's South Africa, talking about how there's racial discrimination behind every door. So, okay.
Labour posted "Kill the Boer" lyrics in their manifesto that year.
Yeah. And then we get to the last one I'm looking at here. So you can see 92. So this is the last Conservative win. And all they write is, we are determined to maintain our present system of immigration controls, but an increasing number of would-be immigrants from Eastern Europe and other parts of the world seek to abuse our openness to genuine refugees. The number of people seeking refugee status has risen from 5,000 a year to 45,000 in the past 4 years. That's just
what we would give for
45.
immigration of 45,000 a year.
no, that's over 4 years. So that's 11,000 a year. That's what they're whining about. For context, in 2022, it was 222,000. That was just refugees. That was just people claiming refuge in the UK.
Oh God, it is so over.
And the Labour Party had zero to say on immigration. I did skip over something, actually. Back in 1983 or whatever, the Labour Party, for some reason, just mentioned homosexuals and then just deleted it from every further manifesto. Which I didn't have time for, but there we are. But then, of course, that's the end. That's where we get back to where I was before, and I've mentioned previously that none of the manifestos on from here talk about increasing immigration. They're all about dropping it. And, well, what happens? Well, we have the graph. Something happened in the 1990s.
Yeah.
Well, it was the end of history. That's what happens. This guy. I mean, this image is just weird. But just for a minute.
Yes, it is a bit sort of Shadow Lord, isn't it?
Tony Blair. People who don't know, there's Hearts of Iron 4 is a World War II game.
Oh God, you're actually going to put it in the segment. Oh my God.
And obviously, there's a particular mustache man who kind of is central to that whole, era. And they couldn't release that in Germany as they wanted to. So instead, for the German release, made Shadow Hitler. And I'll be honest, when I look at this lineup of candidates, I mean, there is a sort of Shadow Hitler aspect to this. And he is the man that made that something happen, which then made all of our houses completely unaffordable and returned us to a state of 1876 in terms of standard.
And your point is, not only did we never vote for this, is we have for like 60, 70 years voted expressly against it and been promised the exact opposite of what they gave us.
Yeah, I mean, you are looking at 70 years of betrayal from both sides of this. That's the truth. What did we learn? Well, yeah, they've been traitors for 70 years. That's what we learned. And Shadow Hitler. That's a thing. If you appreciated that episode from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content that's on the site, such as a symposium series, this episode on Antigone. If you'd like to find out what else is being put out, you can follow on Twitter at lotuseaters_com on Twitter. Thank you and goodbye.